is running na.
Let me just share my screen. Okay, can I just get a confirmation if you can see the screen?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Okay, so for this one, we will be reporting on end user computing and providing the services needed to support end user computing. There will be 6 parts to this report. Well, 6 subtopics, which we will go through in a bit. So when we talk about end users, so we can easily put ourselves in that situation. We are all end users in one way or another. So usually, what are our needs now? What do we need as end users that those in charge should provide us? One is the user information, the things that we need in order to work. These are the backups that have to, which was discussed earlier. They have to be secure, they have to be of quality, and they have to be delivered in a reliable and timely manner. Another is is on the network. I was about to say we won't really feel it now because we are working from home, but in one way or another, we're connecting to our networks in our offices. So this is reliable access to applications that we need in order to work, and these are what we can call the mission critical applications. We need to access them most lalo na ngayon that we're working from home. And the other is on soft services. So soft services meaning these are help desks where we can ask for advice or that can help us troubleshoot various problems whenever we encounter them. So leading to here, we are talking about end users. So we talk about end user computing as all uses of computers. So basically no holds barred, anything, but by just virtue of using a computer, we are all end user. We call that end user computing. And these can be by business people who are not information systems professionals. And end user development, which we will cover later in the presentation. These are systems development and programming that are undertaken by IS staff, right? So we will cover that in a bit. So what are various end user information system services? So these are all services needed to support the end users in running their computers, which is end user computing, and developing and using applications, which is end user development. Hence, it has to cover both. One moment. Let me just hide. Okay. Okay. So what are various end user services that we have to provide? One is, which I mentioned earlier, is to have a help desk service. So more for problem solving and for troubleshooting. And when we have a problem, we want them to be resolved as quick as possible, which can be difficult to achieve because many requests may need to take some time to solve. We also look for the standardization of software. Um, one driver for this one is that software can be purchased in bulk, which if we put this in our situation, buying in bulk is always cheaper. That's why it's always cheaper by the dozen. And the other driver is that it's easier to maintain. So if you don't have to think about the different word processors that's there. You just have to you're using just one software. Another is on network efficiency. So we want to ensure that there's no downtime and that applications are always accessible. Another service is to provide training. So this can be on a basic level is of the standard use of the company applications, no, the software, hardware that we use to run and do our work. And then on the other end of the spectrum is to provide training in order to uh, develop an application or manage information, borderline end user development. And the other is we want to be cost effective. We want to minimize the total cost of ownership, or the cost, which is the cost of purchase of the software or the hardware, plus the cost to maintain it. So if we're so that's more for from an end user perspective. No? What are some end user IS services ones that you have to think of when you're in a management position? One of the services there is the IS strategy itself, which was discussed in an earlier report. So you have to make sure that our IS strategy is always aligned with the business strategy. We want to also ensure that our investment levels are aligned with the costs that are allowed for us. And if you want to have a centralized or decentralized type of services. So once we have that strategy in place, we want to talk about now the IS infrastructure. So these are the networks, the hardware, and the software services. So we have the business, we have the infrastructure. Now we go to the line of business systems or the applications that are critical to run the business. And the fourth one is on the legal and ethical impact of how we're applying our IS strategy, how we've uh, made our network, and the line of business systems that we have. Okay, now we go with we were talking about networks earlier, and this is the perfect segue for managing network services. So when we talk about managing network services, the goal is to have an integrated information management. So we need to have this talks about maintaining servers, ensuring the availability of end user applications, backups, and restoration information. So we mentioned backups in the earlier report, and we want to also talk about the the maintenance of the network. So hindi lang naman yan na once you put it up there, once you set it up, okay, wala na kailangan gawin. No, you have to maintain it. And it also helps that you would know the scope and the size of hardware and software applications that are within the organization. What do we mean here by scope and size? You want to know ano ba yung mga different hardware na ginagamit sa organization natin, and even the software. Ilan ba yan, right? Because we want to know what connects to our system, what are the different computers, what are the different software applications that connects to our system. And also it also talks about cost. Because you want to know we mentioned earlier maintenance, the purchase and the maintenance, which is again the perfect segue for a cost-effective delivery of IS services. In our personal experience, when we purchase a computer, we only talk about the purchase cost, the cost of buying that computer. But we have to realize, even and by extension, the company has to realize, the organization has to realize that this is not the only cost to a computer or even to a software. There's the cost to in terms of PC. There's the cost to maintain the PC. If laging sira yung PC, if it always bugs down, there's always a cost to have the parts, to the cost of having someone to fix it, right? And there's the cost of supporting users, which leads to if you need just by supporting users, it's already a cost. You also need the cost of running a help desk, which is the place where users can go to whenever they need anything for support. And these all adds up to what we called identified earlier as the total cost of ownership. So the total cost of ownership is the total cost for a company operating a computer, or even by extension a software, an IS, right? Some literature would call it as not only the purchase or the leasing cost, but the cost of all the services needed to support as well the end user. Gartner calls it a comprehensive assessment. So not just the initial cost, but all the cost over time. To illustrate further what total cost of ownership is, we can look into the different costs over at three parts of an enterprise software. First is the startup costs. So we have to acquire the software, the hardware, to implement it. And then once we implement it, if there's the need for user licenses, you have to purchase that. The cost of training, the cost of integrating that with the different applications that we have in the organization. There's the cost of data migration of if there was an existing one, or if it came from manual. That's where you put it. That's the cost center where you put it. And there's also customizations if there are processes that the system has to uh, has to cater. The second phase is the operation costs, which is basically the maintenance and support. If there are any enhancements, the cost of downtimes, if that downtime needs some fixing, the cost of patches to have that user and admin support, depreciation, additional user licenses if your organization grows, then the cost of making sure that it's always available, and for disaster recovery, any upgrades, retraining or training a data center, and the security itself. And then once you retire the software or the hardware or the enterprise software, there's also the retirement cost. You have to export the data. You have to archive the system and to inactive licenses. So hindi naman yan total shutdown agad. You can store it somewhere and then access it from time to time, right? And some ways to reduce the total cost of ownership. Uh, Literature says that we can focus on the people, making sure that our end users are trained and the IT staff are also trained, so they know the optimal use of controlling processes and technologies. There's on the focus on processes, so we can automate and streamline tasks, and the focus on technologies, which is to um, technologies that remove labor-intensive tasks. So since we're talking about the internet, um, part of the topic is talking about our because I would assume that we are all employees accessing the internet from one way or another when we were in our offices. Um, and there are some concerns about employees accessing the internet. So one is the improper use of internet at work. So we use it for shopping, we use it to uh, plan our travels, to download stuff, to view non-work related sites. And then the use of social media, Facebook, Instagram, what have you. And because it also runs the risks of, which was covered earlier, the risks of malware and spyware and phishing emails, right? And which leads now to what businesses would call cyber slacking. So it's using the internet for personal reasons while at work. So businesses would call it cyber slacking, and the businesses would always think of the business impact. No? Um, baka because they're unproductive, because being unproductive is costly, or the employees are being paid for, and they're not doing their jobs, they're doing their own thing. um So is an outright ban a solution? Some would say it would just cause backlash from employees, and some would say that social media would also help in putting employee morale or what have you. So some would just say, literature would just say to strike a balance in the topic of accessing the internet, um, because some would say it would also be beneficial for them to access their thing through the internet. And the last topic on this one is monitoring electronic communications. So this mentions that using surveillance as a means to reduce productivity losses through time wasting activities. So you want to know if your employees are on just working on unproductive emails or unacceptable contents or unproductive sites, right? So we mentioned earlier to strike a balance. So I think it's in the company's prerogative to have an acceptable use policy, which is the statement of employee activities involving the use of the network, which can be acceptable by the management. So it's a balance between what the employees can do and what management deems to be fit for use. Some companies would go even further to have scanning software which identifies email or web page accesses, which may breach company guidelines or the acceptable use policy. And one step further is to have filtering software that blocks specific content or activities. And so now we go to end user computing. We mentioned earlier this definition of end user computing, which is all users of computers who by business people, not information systems professionals. Other literature, so we commented earlier that this is like just by virtue of using a computer and you're not an IS systems professionals, you are doing end user programming, end user computing. Sorry. Another definition can be allowing end users to uh, for better control their computing environment without the aid of real programmers or developers in order to automate their tasks. So they want to have uh, their own applications to and like a functional group that would get their own computer applications, which is control of what applications or software they can use in order to help themselves be more productive in order to automate tasks. Another definition refers to systems and platforms that are meant to allow non-programmers to create working computer applications. Sounds familiar, right? So taking these definitions, the first definition may fall under a traditional end user computing, which is just by virtue of using a computer, you're doing end user computing. The other is end user control. The end users control whatever applications or hardware that they're using for their work. And the third, that's why it sounds familiar because it's already end user development. It's the system platforms that that allow them, non-programmers, to create their own working computer applications. So some organizational drivers for end user computing is it allows for greater control. So departments can choose their own applications if they need if this department just needs their own, like say Zoom, right, or like a communication tool, and then that department just wants to use Zoom, they would get that for their own department, and more or less that's more of the example there. There's a decrease in backlog, meaning they can Like if the backlog for requested systems is very very long, they can just get their own for their own function or for their own department, which can decrease that backlog. And to empower also their functional staff, so it can also generate very creative ideas, and it's also an outlet for innovative ideas on how to solve the problems of that function. So who better to solve the problems of the function by none other by those who are within that function. Some technology drivers, it's one is to have a personal computer and workstation, visual development tools. So visual development tools are like Visual Basic. Support for productivity is these are the extensions of Microsoft Excel. Say, for example, Microsoft Excel, you can do your own applications using Excel through macros, which is already borderline Visual Basic, and an increase in information system skills. So there's anyone can already operate their own computer. Anyone can learn how to code. Just, I mean, hopefully, with the free time that we have now, with the technology that's there now, anyone can learn how to develop their own applications. So just to show, you can segment company staff in by class of what type of end user they are. So they can be non-programming end users, they can be power users, there can be programming level end users. There can also be end users that are more into business analysis, and then the end users that are who are also end users themselves are help desk staff, and lastly are the application developers themselves. So the last topic is perhaps the most concrete way on how we can support end users is through the IT help desk. So for IT help desk, this is the central facility in an organization which provides end user help desk services such as phone support for troubleshooting, training, which we mentioned earlier. So not just by using the application or software that's there, they can also provide training for end user development, which is already borderline the next point, guidance on end user development and management of user information. So some of the services that they provide, to further elaborate, is to help the support for end user problems via email, telephone, instant messaging, or even in person. There's advice on software purchase, so they can provide, if a function wants to get a software, the help desk should be able to provide if it's suitable for purpose and compatible with the policies and the hardware that's there. There's also advice on hardware purchase. Hardware naman is a little bit more centralized because, as we mentioned earlier, you can, lalo na for hardware, you can always get it cheaper by the dozen. So buying it in bulk is always cost effective. There's advice on how to do end user development. There's application development itself for more difficult aspects of programming. Mentioned earlier, training and data management. So they can provide the data and how that data is formatted. Lastly, how or through what medium does the IT help desk provide their services? One is through the asset management software, which can already tell them the technical details of the system. That's in a computer or in a hardware. The other is computer telephony integration. So there's that caller ID, caller ID, caller identification, which if you call the help desk, it would already load the details of who's calling, what's the computer, the current user, and the configuration of of the hardware. There's case-based reasoning. So this is using AI to guide users or help desk staff through the process of solving the problem. There's the self-service web-based intranet access. So all the FAQs, knowledge bases, documentations are there, so they can just so end users can solve their own problems before calling the help desk. And lastly, there's workflow, which can be used to prioritize user queries and assign them to the best staff placed to deal with them. And that ends the first part of the presentation. Chris will be covering the next two, end user development and managing end user computing as part of the IS strategy. Chris?
Yes, thank you, Lance. So let me just share my presentation. Can everyone see my PowerPoint? Can I also get confirmation?
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. All right, so yeah, I'll talk about the second half of chapter 16, which is end user computing. So this is composed of the two topics, end user development and managing end user computing as part of IS strategy. So I'll talk about end user development first. End user development as defined by McGill et al. In their article in 2003 as user-developed applications, or UDAs, are computer-based applications for which non-information systems professionals assume primary development responsibility. They support decision-making and organizational processes in the majority of organizations. So essentially, this refers to applications developed by non-IS professionals. And these types of applications actually has become a trend nowadays. And this is because of the widespread use of high-level applications. Applications such as Microsoft Excel, Word, Microsoft Access, because these types of applications contain macro languages. And today, developing and using spreadsheet models and reporting systems is the predominant example of end user development. Applications and tools for end user development. So these are tools that are usually high-level reporting and programming tools. So going back to the previous example, high-level tools such as productivity tools created by Microsoft, or even high-level programming tools and languages. High-level programming languages such as Python has become common nowadays. So it allows end users to be able to write their own applications. And definitely, it's rare for end users to write codes using a lower level language, such as, for example, C++ or Java. Because definitely these lower level languages, programming languages, would require extensive training. And normally, people who have low level programming language skills would be part of a development team or would be part of IS. Other applications and tools for end user development can include the following. So number one, reports from a corporate database using standard entries defined by the IS or IT function. Simple ad hoc queries to databases defined by the user. What if tools? So these are the analysis using tools such as spreadsheet models or more specialized tools such as risk or financial management packages, or business intelligence software used for monitoring sales and marketing performance of information stored in a data warehouse. It can be as simple as writing company information for a company intranet. And lastly, development of applications such as a job costing tool or production scheduling system. Once again, using easy to use high level tools such as application generators, PC database management systems such as Microsoft Access or FileMaker, or visual programming environments such as Microsoft Visual Studio or Embarcadero Delphi. Reasons for the growth of end-user development. So there are two main factors driving the growth of end-user development. Number one is that it only became practical for end users to develop software with the introduction of the PC and the graphical systems development tools. So in the early days of computing, it was almost impossible for a typical end user to be able to develop their own applications, primarily because of the complexity of available applications. But nowadays, applications has become more user-friendly, if you will, which has allowed typical end users to be able to create their own applications out of existing applications already. The second one is users were not receiving the required response from the IS department in terms of building systems for them. So with the technological advancement in IS, IS departments now has to focus on corporate, mission critical type of applications, such as production, financial, and perhaps customer services related applications. So they no longer have the resources available to develop smaller scale systems required in smaller teams or in smaller departments. Some of the less significant reasons driving the growth of end user development are as follows. First, the desire by users to query and analyze data and generate reports from information stored on databases available across the corporate network. A trend to decentralization of computing to user departments for systems to support departmental activities. Reduced expense of application development when conducted by end users. So this refers to the budget. So from the departmental, so now departmental rather than information systems budget. Better fit between end user developed software and their requirements, since no requirements translation is needed between the users and third-party developers. So in an end user development setting, most likely the developer is going to be the user of the application as well. So in terms of acquiring requirements for that application, it just becomes easier with end user development. End users are also less likely to over-engineer, quote unquote, a solution to a basic problem than an IS professional who will want to treat every problem with rigor. So what are the benefits of end user development? Number one, a reduction in the number of professional analysts and programmers and IS staff employed by a company, and reduced cost of employing outside consultants. If there's a healthy number of end user developed applications within an organization, chances are that the need for more IS professionals, analysts, and programmers will also be less. Reduction in communications overheads of users explaining requirements to IS professionals, and also reduced risk of mistranslation of requirements, help in reducing the applications development backlog associated with centralizing applications development in an IS department. So this goes back to the fact that with end user development, this does not require an entire team of developers in a complete set of a development team. Normally, you would have business process analysts who gathers the requirements for a specific project before translating that or communicating that to the developers for the applications and systems. So definitely with end user development, chances of miscommunication, of mistranslation of the requirements to the actual developed application will be a lot less complicated. Next one is IS staff can focus on tasks requiring their expertise, such as the maintenance of corporate systems. It allows applications in departments to be developed more quickly, so the business can benefit from new facilities more quickly and gain competitive advantage. And lastly, it can encourage innovation and creativity in the use of ISIT, since bureaucratic barriers can be removed. And to quote McGill et al. In their 2003 article, perhaps the most important benefit claimed for user development of applications is improvement in employee productivity and performance, resulting from a closer match between applications and user needs, since the end user is both the developer and the person who best understands the information requirements. So this goes back to the premise that in an end user development setting, chances are the developer would also be the end user, and being the end user, he or she would know and would understand the requirements to solve a specific problem well. A useful way to assess the benefits of end-user developed applications is by using the model of DeLone and McLean in an article in 1992. So this model shows that success is dependent on the quality characteristics of the IS itself, so the system quality, the quality of the output of the IS, the information quality, consumption of the output of the IS, the use, the IS user's response to the IS, which is the user satisfaction, the effect of the IS on the behavior of the user, which refers to the individual impact, and the effect of the IS on the organizational performance or the organizational impact. The development of end user development in an organization. So this refers to the stages of development. The first stage is isolation. So in isolation stage, a few scattered pioneers of end user development, they develop small scale business tools within their area. So this is in the isolation stage. The second one is standalone. So in the standalone stage, larger scale applications are developed, and this may be of importance to a department. For the manual integration stage, here, different end user applications need to exchange data. And that integration, in order for the applications to be able to exchange data, this is through manual intervention. So thus the name of the third stage, manual integration. The fourth one is automated integration. So in this stage, users start to link into corporate applications to gain seamless access to information. And then the last one is distributed integration. So at this stage of development, there is a good level of integration between different end user applications and corporate systems already. So let's talk about the problems of end user development. In the article, the authors presented a table wherein we'll find a list of associated EUD or end user development related problems mapped to the stages of the system development lifecycle. So during the initiation stage, in an end user development setting, there can be absence or limited feasibility study. And without feasibility study or the absence of it, the user may be developing a system that is not required or solving a problem that has been solved before already. And then in the analysis stage, in an end user development setting, since this does not involve an entire team of developers, chances are analysis is going to be limited. And with limited analysis, the end user, they may not consult others in the company who may have a different perspective. And this may result into alienating potential users and mean that the software is unsuitable for its application. And in an end user development setting, the design stage in the system development lifecycle, this is completely omitted. And the problem with this is that without the design stage, this can adversely affect the usability, speed, and security of the software. During the build stage, programming will occur as normal. However, the problem is that ancillary activities may be omitted. And next is the implementation stage. The problem with end user development is that since it doesn't involve an entire team, it becomes more difficult for large systems. And lastly, as for the maintenance, problems here related to end user development are minor. Problems such as users may not keep an adequate list of problems that need to be fixed, or there is also a tendency to release updates to the software without good version control. The general risks or misuse of information associated with end user developed IS are also listed here. First is using information that is out of date. Next is information requires export from other information systems before it can be analyzed by the end user application. Corruption of centrally held data by uploading erroneous data. And development of insecure systems without password control that are vulnerable to accidental and deliberate damage. Now let's talk about managing end user computing as part of an IS strategy. In this topic, we are given techniques to improve control of end user development. So these techniques include, number one, training. So when we conduct training to improve control of end user development, we want to provision relevant courses, both in how to program and in how to approach systems development in a structured way. Suitability review. So during reviews, this is where authorization of major end user new developments take place. And this is usually reviewed by IS managers to check that these newly developed applications are indeed necessary. Standards for development. We want to create standards in order to improve control of end user development. As standards will usually recommend that documentation and structured testing of all user development software occurs. Next one is guidance from end user support personnel. So this refers to help desk. So in this technique, help desk staff can provide training used to develop software. Software and data audits. So regular audits should occur of software produced by end users for data and application quality. And lastly, ensuring corporate data security. So you want to be able to ensure that users are not permitted to enter data directly into central databases, except maybe via those applications specially written for that particular purpose by the IS or by the IS department themselves. And that concludes our presentation for today. Do you have questions?
Any questions for Lance and Chris?